Jake Martinez thought he had seen everything in the corporate world. He had worked at Technocore Solutions for 3 years, fixing computer problems and dealing with frustrated clients. His boss, Ms. Zarevex, was different from other managers. He had known she was incredibly smart, always calm under pressure, and somehow knew the solution to every technical problem before anyone else even understood. What was wrong? Sure. There were small things about her that seemed odd. She never ate the pizza during office parties. Her skin always looked perfect, like she had never been tired or stressed a day in her life. And sometimes when she spoke during meetings, her voice had this musical quality that made everyone stop what they were doing and listen. But Jake figured that was just part of being a really good boss. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Jake arrived at the office with his usual coffee, ready to tackle another day of troubleshooting and client calls. But when Ms. Vex walked through the front door, something was completely different. Instead of her usual sharp business suit, she wore a flowing dress that seemed to change colors slightly when she moved. Her normally neat hair was loose and somehow looked more vibrant than before. But it was her eyes that really caught Jake's attention. They had always been green, but now they seemed to glow with an inner light that was both beautiful and a little unsettling. "Good morning, everyone," she said, and her voice carried a tone Jake had never heard before. It was like listening to a song that made you feel happy and confused at the same time. The entire office went quiet. Tommy from the IT department dropped his pen. Lisa from accounting stared openly from behind her computer screen. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, the receptionist who had worked there for 15 years and had seen everything, peeked over her monitor with wide eyes. Jake felt something strange in his chest, like his heart was beating to a rhythm he didn't recognize. He shook his head, trying to focus on his work, but he couldn't stop glancing at his boss. "I need to call a team meeting," Ms. Vex announced. "There are some important changes we need to discuss about our work environment." The meeting that followed was unlike anything Jake had experienced in his professional career. Ms. Vex spoke about seasonal adjustments and how certain biological factors might affect everyone's productivity. She used words that sounded corporate but didn't quite make sense in context. "We'll need to make some modifications to our workspace," she explained, walking around the conference room in a way that reminded Jake of a graceful bird. "I'll be evaluating our team dynamics more closely and may need to reorganize some of our partnerships." Jake noticed she kept touching her neck and wrists while she talked, almost like she was checking her pulse. But her movements were so fluid and deliberate that it looked more like some kind of ritual. The nervousness. The strangest part was how she looked at each person in the room. When her eyes met Jake's, he felt that weird sensation in his chest. Again, stronger this time. It was like she was seeing something about him that he didn't even know existed. After the meeting, things got even weirder. Ms. Vex spent the afternoon rearranging the office furniture, moving desks and chairs around, until she had a clear view of everyone from her office door. She made 3 different seating charts, each time positioning herself where she could see all the men in the office more clearly. Then she did something that made everyone scratch their heads. She called the building manager and requested several large plants from the lobby, not small desk plants, but big ones with broad leaves and unusual flowers that Jake had never seen before. "These will improve our air quality during this transitional period," she explained when Tommy asked about them, but the way she arranged them around the office seemed more decorative than practical. As the day went on, Jake noticed other changes. Ms. Vex seemed more aware of everything happening around her. When someone dropped a paper clip, she turned toward the sound immediately. When the coffee machine beeped, she tilted her head like she was listening to music only she could hear. And there was something else. The office felt different. The air seemed thicker somehow, and Jake found himself taking deeper breaths without thinking about it. Several of his co-workers seemed affected too. Tommy kept stretching and rolling his shoulders like he had extra energy. Lisa hummed while she worked, which was something she never did. Even grumpy old Bob from maintenance was whistling in the hallways. Jake decided to stay late to finish a project report, but really he wanted to observe Ms. Vex when she thought no one was watching. Most of the office had cleared out by 6 o'clock, leaving just the two of them and the security guard downstairs. That's when he saw something that made him question everything. He thought he knew about reality.ms. Vex was standing by the large windows that faced west, watching the sunset, but she wasn't just standing there. She was moving in a way that was almost like dancing, her arms extended gracefully at her sides, her head tilted back slightly, and she was making a sound, a low humming that was incredibly beautiful, but definitely not human. The really weird part was what happened to the plants as she hummed. They seemed to respond to her voice. The leaves turned toward her like they were listening, and Jake could swear they were swaying even though there was no breeze in the office. Jake rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was more tired than he realized. But when he looked again, the scene was the same. His boss was clearly doing something that normal human bosses didn't do. He tried to back away quietly, but apparently Ms. Vex had incredibly good hearing. "Jake," she said without turning around, "you can come out. I know you're there." His heart started pounding. He had been caught spying on his boss doing something that was either a very private moment or possibly supernatural. Either way, he was probably about to get fired. But when she turned to face him, she didn't look angry. Instead, she looked sad and maybe a little relieved. "I was wondering when someone would notice," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality even more strongly now. "You're more observant than most people, Jake. That's probably why you're less affected by what's happening to me." "Less affected by what?" Jake managed to ask, though his voice came out as barely a whisper. "Ms. Vex walked toward him, and with each step, Jake noticed details about her that seemed impossible. Her movements were too fluid, too perfect. Her skin seemed to have a very faint glow in the dim office lighting, and her eyes, those impossibly green eyes, reflected light in a way that human eyes definitely didn't. "I think it's time we had a conversation," she said, "about who I really am, and why everything in this office is about to get very complicated." Jake looked around at the rearranged furniture, the mysterious plants, and his boss who was clearly not what she seemed to be. He thought about the strange feelings he'd been having all day, the way his coworkers had been acting, and the growing certainty that his normal, boring job was about to become anything but normal. "Okay," he said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. "I'm listening." But even as he said it, Jake had a feeling that whatever Ms. Vex was about to tell him would change everything he thought he knew about the world, and maybe, just maybe, about himself too. The office around them seemed to pulse with an energy that definitely wasn't coming from the building's electrical system. The plants swayed gently in their impossible breeze, and Jake realized that his life was about to get very interesting. The next morning, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. Ms. Vex humming to plants that moved without any wind, her eyes reflecting light like an animal's. The way she had known he was watching her without even turning round. He had barely slept, replaying every strange moment from the past few months. When he arrived at the office, things were even weirder than before. Ms. Vex had brought in more of those exotic foods she'd been sharing lately. The break room table was covered with fruits that Jake was pretty sure didn't exist in any grocery store he'd ever been to. They were beautiful, with colors that seemed to bright in shapes that looked almost geometric. But when people tried them, their faces lit up like they'd tasted something amazing. "Where do you even buy these things?" Tommy asked, holding up a purple fruit that sparkled slightly in the fluorescent lights. "I have my sources," Ms. Vex replied with a mysterious smile. Jake noticed that everyone who ate the strange food seemed more energetic afterward. Lisa from accounting was practically bouncing in her chair. Bob, the maintenance guy, was humming that same tune Ms. Vex had been singing the night before, though he probably didn't realize it. But the really weird stuff started during the morning meeting. Ms. Vex had called another team gathering, and this time she wanted everyone to do breathing exercises that she claimed would improve their focus and productivity. "I want everyone to look into each other's eyes while we do this," she instructed, her voice carrying that hypnotic quality again. "Eye contact builds trust and improves communication." Jake had never been in a business meeting that involved staring into his coworkers' eyes for extended periods. It was uncomfortable at first, but then something strange happened. He started feeling more connected to everyone in the room. Not in a romantic way, but like he could sense their emotions somehow. When Tommy was feeling stressed about a project, Jake knew it without Tommy saying anything. When Lisa was excited about her weekend plans, that excitement seemed to flow through the room. The breathing exercises were even stranger. Ms. Vex guided them through patterns that didn't match any meditation or yoga Jake had ever heard of, but they left everyone feeling alert and strangely harmonized with each other. After the meeting, Jake decided he needed answers. He had always been the type of person who solved problems by gathering information, and his boss was definitely a problem that needed solving. During lunch, he made his decision. Instead of going to the cafeteria, he headed to Ms. Vex's office. The door was slightly open, so he knocked and stepped inside. What he saw made him freeze in place. Ms. Vex was standing in the center of her office with her arms extended in a graceful pose. That reminded Jake of a bird about to take flight. Her head was tilted back, and that beautiful humming sound filled the room. But this time, the effect on her surroundings was impossible to ignore. The plants that had appeared in the office over the past few days had grown noticeably larger. They were all oriented toward her like she was the sun they needed to survive. The air in the room seemed to shimmer slightly, and Jake could swear he felt a gentle breeze even though all the windows were closed. But the most shocking thing was Ms. Vex herself. Her skin had a faint glow, and her hair seemed to move as if she was underwater. When she breathed, Jake could see patterns of light rippling across her body like waves on a lake. "Ms. Vex," he said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She slowly lowered her arms and turned to face him. Instead of looking embarrassed or angry at being caught, she looked relieved. "Jake," she said, and her voice had harmonics in it that made his chest vibrate. "I was hoping you would come. You seem to be handling this better than the others." "Handling what better?" Jake asked, though he was pretty sure he already knew the answer was going to change his entire understanding of reality. Ms. Vex gestured for him to sit down, then closed her office door. The plants in the room rustled softly, as if they were settling in to listen to an important conversation. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible," she began, pacing her office with that fluid grace he'd been noticing more and more. "But I think you've already figured out that I'm not exactly what I appear to be." Jake nodded, his heart pounding. "You're not human, are you?" A small smile crossed her face. "Very good. You're right. I'm from a place called Zirion Prime. It's a planet quite far from here, but our two worlds have more in common than you might think." The next hour was the most mind-bending conversation of Jake's life. Ms. Vex explained that her people had evolved from being similar to Earth's birds, which explained her graceful movements and the way she seemed to communicate with the plants. She had been sent to Earth as what she called a cultural liaison, learning about human society and business practices. "My species is very good at adapting to new environments," she explained. "I've been working on Earth for 3 years, and I genuinely love your planet and your people. But there's something happening to me that I didn't expect." She went on to explain that her people had biological cycles similar to seasons. Every few Earth years, they went through a period that she translated as a bonding time. During this phase, they would seek out life partners through complex displays of compatibility and skill. "The problem," she continued, looking genuinely distressed, "is that I'm the only one of my kind on this planet. These instincts are incredibly powerful, and they're affecting everyone around me whether I want them to or not." Jake thought about the strange feelings he'd been having, the way his coworkers had been acting, and the general sense that the office atmosphere had completely changed. "So that's why everyone's been acting weird," he said. "My people release what you might call pheromones during this time," Ms. Vex confirmed. "Humans can't consciously detect them, but they still have an effect. The men in the office are becoming more competitive with each other. The women feel compelled to help me find a suitable partner. Everyone is more emotionally connected than usual." Jake remembered Tommy and Brad getting into that ridiculous argument about the coffee machine yesterday, and how Lisa had started asking Ms. Vex personal questions about her dating life. But you seem less affected than the others, Ms. Vex continued, studying his face carefully. I think it's because you have a naturally analytical mind. You're processing what's happening logically instead of just reacting emotionally. What exactly are you asking me to do? Jake asked, though part of him was afraid of the answer. I need your help, she said simply. I don't know how to handle these instincts in a human workplace. On my world, this process is natural and understood by everyone involved, but here, I'm causing chaos without meaning to. I need someone who can think clearly to help me figure out how to manage this situation before I accidentally ruin everyone's professional relationships permanently. Jake looked around her office, taking in the thriving plants, the subtle changes in lighting and air quality, and his boss who had just revealed herself to be an alien going through what was essentially an otherworldly mating season. Okay, he said, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. I'll help you, but I have to ask, how long is this bonding time supposed to last? Ms. Vex's expression became even more worried. That's the other problem. On my world, it continues until a suitable partner is found. And Jake, I think my instincts have already started making a choice. The way she was looking at him when she said that made Jake's stomach flip, because suddenly he realized that all those strange feelings he'd been having might not just be alien pheromones affecting his judgment. They might be his own genuine emotions responding to someone who was extraordinary in ways he was only beginning to understand. The office around them seemed to pulse with energy, and Jake wondered if he was about to become part of the most unusual workplace situation in human history. Jake thought helping Ms. Vex manage her situation would be straightforward. He was wrong. Over the next week, the office transformed into something that looked like a nature documentary about territorial animals, except everyone was wearing business clothes and pretending it was normal. Tommy from IT had become obsessed with impressing Ms. Vex through technology every morning. Jake arrived to find Tommy had left perfectly arranged coffee on her desk, along with small electronic devices he'd built himself. The devices hummed at frequencies that seemed to make Ms. Vex's eyes light up with genuine appreciation. What exactly are those things? Jake asked Tommy one day, pointing at a small silver box that was making a soft, musical sound. I'm not entirely sure, Tommy admitted, looking a bit confused by his own behavior. I just felt like I needed to build them. Something about the frequency range seemed important. Meanwhile, Brad from the sales department had appointed himself as the office's unofficial fitness instructor. He'd started doing push-ups by the water cooler whenever Ms. Vex walked by, and had somehow convinced management to let him give presentations during lunch about leadership through physical excellence. You know, Jake, Brad said one afternoon, while doing bicep curls with a stapler, I've been reading about alpha leadership strategies. I think our team could really benefit from understanding natural dominance patterns. Jake watched Brad do squats next to the printer and wondered if this was what madness looked like when it wore a tie. But the most surprising change was in Lisa from accounting. She had transformed from a quiet, reserved person into Ms. Vex's self-appointed relationship advisor. Lisa had been researching what she called exotic dating practices and had started organizing office events that were obviously designed to help Ms. Vex find a romantic partner. I set up a speed networking session for Thursday, Lisa announced during a team meeting, her eyes bright with enthusiasm she'd never shown for accounting work. Everyone will have 3 minutes to discuss their hobbies, life goals, and compatibility preferences with Ms. Vex. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, the normally practical receptionist, had gotten involved in ways that defied explanation. She'd started bringing in rare teas that seemed to complement the strange foods Ms. Vex provided. When Jake asked where she found them, Mrs. Rodriguez just smiled mysteriously and said she had connections. Jake found himself in the impossible position of being a translator between his alien boss and his increasingly confused co-workers. He spent his days mediating ridiculous disputes, like when Tommy and Brad got into a heated argument about whose approach to impressing Ms. Vex was more evolutionarily sound. But the real chaos began when Ms. Vex's instincts kicked into what she called nesting behavior. Jake arrived at work one morning to find that she had completely rearranged her office overnight. The furniture was positioned to create what looked like a sophisticated fort, with flowing curtains made from materials Jake didn't recognize, soft lighting that seemed to pulse gently, with its own rhythm, and the thriving alien plants arranged in complex patterns. "This is completely natural for my people," she explained when Jake stared in amazement at her transformed office. "We create spaces that reflect our compatibility with potential partners. The arrangement of objects, the flow of energy through the space, the harmony of colors and textures. It all communicates information about what we're looking for in a life partner." The problem was, her nest had become a pilgrimage site for the entire office. People found excuses to walk by her door constantly, and many of them started leaving offerings. Tommy contributed technical manuals about space exploration and communication theory. Brad left motivational books and protein bars. Lisa added romance novels, including several that featured relationships between humans and exotic partners. Mrs. Rodriguez discreetly placed what appeared to be small sculptures around the alien plants, though Jake couldn't tell if they were decorative or had some deeper meaning. Jake spent more and more time in Ms. Vex's transformed office, helping her navigate the increasingly complex social dynamics. During these after-hours conversations, he began to notice something that made his stomach flutter with both excitement and worry. Her nest was specifically designed around things that appealed to him. The books scattered around were topics he'd mentioned enjoying. The lighting highlighted colors he'd said he found calming. The entire space felt like a physical manifestation of the conversations they'd been having about life, dreams, and what made a person truly happy. "Ms. Vex," he said one evening as they worked late on strategies to manage the office situation, "I think your instincts are making some very specific choices." She was adjusting the position of a flowering plant that definitely hadn't existed on Earth a month ago, and at his words, she went very still. "What do you mean?" she asked, though her voice had that musical quality that appeared whenever she was feeling strong emotions. "Look around this office," Jake said, gesturing at the carefully arranged space. "Everything here reflects conversations we've had, the books, the colors, the way the furniture is arranged for collaboration rather than hierarchy. This isn't just a general nesting space. This is designed specifically for me." Ms. Vex turned to face him, and Jake saw something in her expression that was both vulnerable and terrified. "I've been trying to fight it," she admitted quietly. "On my world, when we create a nesting space, it's essentially a proposal. The arrangement tells a potential partner everything about what we're hoping for in a relationship. But I can't control what my instincts are telling me to build." Jake looked around the office again, seeing it with new understanding. This wasn't just an alien creating a comfortable workspace. This was someone building a future around the idea of sharing her life with him. "And what exactly are your instincts telling you?" he asked, his heart pounding. Before she could answer, they heard footsteps in the hallway. Tommy appeared in the doorway, carrying another one of his mysterious electronic devices. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though he didn't look sorry at all. "I just finished building this resonance amplifier, and I wanted Ms. Vex to test it." Behind him, Brad appeared with a stack of business leadership books. "I brought some reading material that might help with team optimization strategies." Then Lisa showed up with printouts of what appeared to be compatibility questionnaires, and Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with a tray of that impossible tea that smelled like flowers. That didn't exist on Earth. Jake realized that despite all their planning, the situation was spiraling completely out of control. Ms. Vex's biological imperative was affecting everyone so strongly that they were essentially in competition with each other, without consciously understanding why. "Guys," Jake said, trying to sound casual while his mind raced for a solution, "I think we need to have an all-hands meeting tomorrow to discuss some workplace efficiency issues." As his co-workers reluctantly left, Jake turned back to Ms. Vex, who was looking at her nest with an expression of despair. "This is getting worse, isn't it?" she asked. Jake nodded. "Your instincts are getting stronger, which means their effect on everyone else is intensifying. We need to find a way to resolve this before someone gets hurt." What he didn't say was that he was becoming increasingly certain that his own feelings weren't just the result of alien pheromones. Spending time with Ms. Vex, learning about her world and her perspectives, seeing her genuine care for the humans she worked with, had awakened something in him that felt deeper and more real than any crush he'd ever experienced. But admitting that would complicate everything, especially when he wasn't sure if her instincts choosing him meant she actually cared about him personally, or if he was just the most compatible human available. As he looked around her beautifully arranged office, designed around a future he wasn't sure he was brave enough to want, Jake realized that the next few days would determine not just the fate of their workplace, but possibly the rest of his life. Jake woke up the next morning knowing that something had to change. The office situation was getting out of hand, and Ms. Vex looked more stressed every day. When he arrived at work, he found her standing in the middle of the main office area, looking determined but nervous. "Everyone, please gather around," she announced in that musical voice that made everyone stop what they were doing immediately. "I need to address what's been happening in our workplace over the past few weeks." The entire staff assembled in the common area. Jake noticed that Tommy had unconsciously positioned himself where he could see Ms. Vex clearly, while Brad had straightened his posture and was standing in what he probably thought was an impressive leadership pose. Lisa clutched a notebook full of what Jake suspected were more compatibility questions, and Mrs. Rodriguez watched everything with knowing eyes. "I realize that recent changes in our work environment have created some unusual dynamics," Ms. Vex began, choosing her words carefully, "and I take full responsibility for the confusion this has caused." Jake held his breath, wondering how she was going to explain alien biology to a room full of humans who thought she was just their very efficient boss. "What you've been experiencing," she continued, "is the result of natural processes that are affecting my behavior and, by extension, all of yours. In my culture, when someone reaches a certain point in their personal development, they go through a period of seeking a life partner through demonstration of compatibility and shared values." She paused, letting this sink in. Jake could see his coworkers processing this information with varying degrees of confusion and interest. "I've decided that the best way to resolve this situation, for everyone's comfort and workplace harmony, is to hold a formal selection process. This will allow everyone to participate fairly while bringing closure to this transitional period." The room was dead silent for a moment. Then Tommy raised his hand like he was in school. "Are you talking about some kind of competition?" he asked. "Exactly," Ms. Vex replied with a relieved smile. "A series of challenges that will demonstrate compatibility, creativity, and partnership potential. Once the selection is made, everything can return to normal." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had helped Ms. Vex plan this approach, but hearing it announced to the whole office made it feel surreal. They were about to hold what was essentially a dating game show in their corporate workplace. "What kind of challenges?" Brad asked, and Jake could practically see him mentally preparing for some kind of physical competition. Ms. Vex had spent hours designing challenges that would be fair to everyone, while revealing the qualities her alien instincts were seeking. The first challenge was something she called environmental harmony. Each participant would redesign a section of the office to demonstrate their understanding of efficient space usage while creating an atmosphere that promoted both productivity and well-being. Tommy immediately started sketching technical diagrams, planning to turn his assigned area into something that looked like a computer lab from the future. Brad began moving furniture around to create what he called zones of optimal workflow energy. But Jake took a different approach. He remembered all the conversations he'd had with Ms. Vex about her homeworld, where spaces flowed organically, and every element served multiple purposes. He arranged his section to balance functionality with natural beauty, incorporating the alien plants that had been appearing around the office. He created areas for focused work and collaboration, with lighting that felt warm but efficient. When Ms. Vex toured each section, Jake noticed that she spent the longest time in his area, running her fingers along surfaces and testing how the space felt from different angles. "This is very thoughtful," she said quietly, and Jake caught a hint of that harmonious humming under her breath. The second challenge was even more unusual. Ms. Vex called it cultural bridge building, which involved preparing a meal that would appeal to someone with very different dietary needs and cultural background. This led to the bizarre sight of grown professionals researching exotic ingredients and experimenting with flavor combinations that had never existed in human cuisine. Tommy approached it like an engineering problem, creating nutritionally perfect dishes that looked like they belonged in a laboratory. Brad focused on what he called power foods, high-protein combinations that he claimed would optimize physical performance. But Jake remembered the subtle ways Ms. Vex had described her Homeworld's approach to food, where every meal was supposed to create harmony between the person and their environment. He created dishes that combined earth vegetables with flavor profiles inspired by mysterious foods Ms. Vex had been sharing. When she tasted his creations, her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She made a soft sound that was almost like singing, and for a moment, her careful human facade slipped enough that Jake could see the otherworldly grace that was her true nature. "This is remarkable," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that made everyone in the room turn to look at them. "You understand the principle of resonance between nourishment and well-being." The final challenge was the most complex. Ms. Vex called it partnership synthesis, which required working directly with her on a project that would demonstrate how well they could combine their different skills and perspectives. This was where things got really interesting, because it became clear that Ms. Vex had abilities far beyond what she'd been showing in her role as a human manager. She could process information at incredible speeds, had an intuitive understanding of complex systems that seemed almost magical, and could somehow interface with technology in ways that made Tommy's technical skills look elementary. Tommy tried to direct her abilities like she was a very advanced computer, but Jake could see this frustrated her. Brad attempted to take charge of the project, treating her extraordinary skills as resources to be managed, which clearly went against every instinct she had about partnership and equality. But when Jake worked with her, something different happened. Instead of trying to control or direct her abilities, he built on them. When she processed data in ways that seemed impossible, he asked questions that helped her translate those insights into concepts humans could understand and apply. When she demonstrated her technical interface abilities, he suggested practical applications that could benefit their clients while respecting her limitations. They developed solutions together that neither of them could have created alone. Jake's human perspective grounded her otherworldly insights in practical reality, while her abilities expanded his understanding of what was possible. By the end of the week, the outcome was clear to everyone in the office. Tommy had demonstrated impressive technical skills but couldn't adapt to Ms. Vex's nonlinear thinking patterns. Brad had shown leadership potential but struggled with the concept of true partnership rather than hierarchy. Jake, on the other hand, had created something entirely new with Ms. Vex. Their collaboration felt natural and effortless, like they had been working together for years instead of just discovering each other's true capabilities. During the final presentation, as they demonstrated the innovative solutions they developed together, Jake realized that what they had created was more than just a successful project. They had built a foundation for something that could change not just their lives, but possibly their entire understanding of what was possible when different worlds came together. "The choice is clear," Ms. Vex announced to the assembled office, though her eyes were fixed on Jake. "But according to my people's traditions, the selected partner must formally accept the bond, understanding that this represents a commitment that goes far beyond what humans typically consider a romantic relationship." Jake looked around at his co-workers, who were watching this unprecedented workplace drama with fascination and varying degrees of disappointment. Then he looked at Ms. Vex, who was trying to maintain her professional composure while her eyes held a vulnerability that made his heart race. He realized that his answer would determine not just his own future, but possibly the course of human-alien relations for generations to come. No pressure at all. Jake looked at Ms. Vex, standing there in front of the entire office, waiting for his answer to what was possibly the most important question anyone had ever asked him. Her professional mask was slipping, and he could see the person underneath. Someone who was brave enough to travel between worlds, but vulnerable enough to risk everything on the chance that a human might understand her. "Yes," he said simply. "I accept." The change in the office atmosphere was immediate. It was like someone had turned off a machine that had been humming in the background for weeks. The strange tension that had been affecting everyone suddenly lifted, and Jake's coworkers seemed to blink and look around like they were waking up from a confusing dream. "Well," Tommy said, scratching his head and looking at the electronic devices he'd been building, "I guess I can stop making these weird gadgets now. Though I'm still not sure why I felt like I needed to build them in the first place." Brad stopped mid-push-up and stood up, looking embarrassed. "Did I really spend the last 2 weeks doing exercises in the office? That's not like me at all." Lisa looked down at her notebook full of compatibility questions and started laughing. "I can't believe I turned into a matchmaker. I don't even like talking to people about their personal lives normally." Only Mrs. Rodriguez seemed completely unfazed by the whole situation. "I'll put the good tea away until we need it again," she said with a knowing smile that made Jake wonder exactly how much she had understood about what was really happening. Over the next few weeks, Jake learned what it meant to be bonded to someone from another world. It wasn't just about romance, though the emotional connection was deeper than anything he'd ever experienced. Ms. Vex had been serious when she said the bond would be life-changing in ways that went beyond typical human relationships. He found that his analytical abilities were enhanced by her intuitive understanding of complex systems. When he looked at problems now, he could see patterns and connections that had been invisible before. Meanwhile, his human perspective helped her understand emotions and social dynamics in ways that made her even more effective as a leader. The changes weren't just personal. Their partnership began transforming Technocore solutions into something extraordinary, with Ms. Vex's otherworldly insights and Jake's ability to translate them into practical applications. They started developing technologies that seemed impossibly advanced. They specialized in communication systems and what they carefully called cultural integration protocols. Their client list grew to include organizations that Jake was pretty sure weren't entirely human either. Though nobody talked about it directly, Tommy channeled his newfound technical interests into legitimate research and development. The devices he'd been compulsively building turned out to contain principles that were decades ahead of current Earth technology. Several aerospace companies started recruiting him after he published papers on advanced communication theory. Brad discovered that his leadership instincts worked much better when he focused on motivating and supporting people rather than competing with them. The company promoted him to head a new division focused on team development and workplace harmony. Lisa found that her brief experience as a matchmaker had given her genuine insights into human relationships and communication. She started a consulting business helping other companies improve their workplace dynamics, though she never quite understood where her new skills had come from. Mrs. Rodriguez accepted a position with what she described as a specialized government agency that handles unusual workplace situations. When Jake asked what that meant, she just winked and said some things were classified. The biggest change was in Jake and Ms. Vex themselves. As their bond deepened, Jake learned more about her world and her people. Zirion Prime was part of a vast network of civilizations that had been quietly interacting with Earth for decades. Ms. Vex's species weren't the only aliens living among humans. "We're not invaders or colonizers," she explained one evening as they worked late in their shared office space, which had evolved into something that looked professional to human visitors, but incorporated subtle elements that felt welcoming to a variety of non-human sensibilities. "We're more like cultural ambassadors and researchers." Many of our species find Earth fascinating because humans have such unique approaches to creativity and problem solving. Jake was still getting used to the idea that his girlfriend was an alien, let alone that Earth was apparently part of some kind of galactic community that most humans didn't know existed. So what happens now? He asked. Do we tell people? Do you have to report back to your home world? Do I need to learn how to breathe in space? Ms. Vex laughed, and the sound had harmonics that made the plants in their office rustle contentedly. Nothing that dramatic. We continue building our life together, our business, and serving as a bridge between our peoples. There are others, like us, human-alien partnerships that help both species understand each other better. 6 months after the office competition that had changed everything, Technocore Solutions had become one of the most innovative companies in their field. Their projects were classified at levels Jake was still getting clearance to understand, but their work was quietly helping to prepare humanity for eventual contact with the broader galactic community. Jake and Ms. Vex were planning what they carefully called a commitment ceremony that would incorporate traditions from both their cultures. The logistics of explaining this to Jake's family were still being worked out, but Ms. Vex had shown remarkable skill at appearing completely human when necessary. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked one evening as they watched the sunset from their office window. Through their bond, he could sense her contentment and amusement at the question. Regret finding my perfect partner and accidentally revolutionizing interspecies relations on Earth. She replied with the dry humor she developed during her time among humans. Never. Though I do wonder what our HR department is going to do when they realize we're technically the first legally recognized interspecies couple. In corporate America, the office had returned to something that looked like normal productivity. But Jake knew that nothing would ever really be normal again. Their work was expanding to include projects that were preparing Earth for changes that most humans couldn't imagine yet. They were hiring new employees who passed increasingly sophisticated screening processes designed to identify people who might be ready for the truth about humanity's place in the universe. And sometimes, late at night when they thought everyone had gone home, Jake would find Ms. Vex standing by their office windows, humming that beautiful alien song while the impossible plants swayed in harmonious response. But now, instead of watching from a distance, he would join her, adding his own voice to create something entirely new, a melody that belonged to neither of their worlds but to the future. They were building together. The last scene Jake would always remember was interviewing new employees alongside Ms. Vex, carefully asking questions about openness to diverse working environments and comfort with non-traditional management structures. Because Technocore Solutions was growing, and they had a feeling they weren't going to be the last human-alien partnership in the corporate world. After all, love, effective communication, and good business practices were apparently universal constants, even across the vast distances between worlds.